In this video, I think I can make a fairly modest case that it really looks like the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, was the precursor to Genesis, and that Genesis, at least a part of Genesis, contains elements in there that reflect things from the Enuma Elish, but we have to isolate those out. That's what I'm going to do in this video. My name is Dan Paulson, and welcome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just point some things out. There's no proof of anything here. We're just looking at what there is available and analyzing it for ourselves. This is not listening to anybody tell us what things are and what they aren't. This is reading and looking for ourselves. What I'm going to be using here is both the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth. I've got that on my in a Word document, as well as the book of Genesis. And I might be using both the King James Version as well as the NSRV. Sometimes when I'm counting things, it's a strange story if you don't know what that is. I need to use the King James Version. But as far as reading it and making comparisons, I'll go ahead and use the NRSV. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is, if you've been following my work, there's a few overlap issues in Genesis between chapters where it looks like there's things were kind of stuffed in. It looked like it had been modified and maybe things were added into it. And when you analyze enough, you begin to see those overlaps, the way the verbiage is, what they're doing, what it's accomplishing. And so there's a bit of an overlap that looks like they had two different stories at one time and they're trying to blend them together. Now, as I look at the Enuma Elish long enough and Genesis long enough, I see that same overlap happening in Genesis that's between the Enuma Elish and Genesis. Not just between Genesis stories, but between religions. So, let's see. How do I get into that? It's a big story, so yeah, buckle up. Okay. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do here is make some claims, but these are not just bold-faced claims here. This comes from other material. I'll put some links below. I'm going to recommend one that there's a channel called Esoterica, and it's the content creator there is Dr. Justin Sledge, and I've got some recommendations of some material from him before. Jewish material, I'm going to be working with that. If you want it pronounced properly and understood properly, I'm going to tell you I'm a Western person, that I'm going to do my best to manage the material respectfully. Okay, that means I will be mispronouncing things, but yeah, you'll see. I'm going to give it a very honest evaluation on what we're looking at. All right, so the first thing I want to say, this is leading up to something, that Genesis to me did not come about in one sitting. There's multiple authors in there, and there's multiple styles. There's even 3 locations right up front where it doesn't even sound like it's a monotheism. It sounds like a polytheism. And even those, if you take those 3 and put them all together, 2 of them match each other, and one of them sounds different. It's like, boy, what is going on? The 2 creation stories, one of them, God said, let there be, and so there was. God said, let there be, and so there was. God said that. And then you get into the second one, and it's not like that. And then God did this and that, and put man into the garden. And there's different kind of things going on. There's staccato places. There's lineages that read like, well, that's kind of bizarre. You analyze them enough, and it's like, that's not a flow. There's pieces chunked into there. It eventually picks up into a flow, but it doesn't start that way. Now, what I'm going to say is that Genesis has been through some iterations, and at first there was a wife to Adam named Lilith. We're going to talk about that here, and again, I'm going to post a link below to a Justin Sledge video on this. He's going to have better information on it. But there was originally in history, in Jewish history, the story of Adam and Eve didn't come about like it did. It started out with Lilith was his first wife. They were both created from the soil. She wanted to be equal, and when it was time for sex, she wanted to be on top. That was not okay. Problems happened. She turned into a demon. You know what? Even though I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here, let me go ahead and just read what's going on. This is The Hebrew Goddess, a book by Raphael Paté, and this is one that Dr. Sledge recommended to me when I was trying to research up on Lilith. And Lilith originally starts out as, well, let me start this right here. I'll just read a little bit. The earliest mention of a she-demon whose name is similar to that of Lilith is found in the Sumerian king list, which dates from circa 24,000 BCE. It states that the father of the great hero Gilgamesh was a Lilu demon. The Lilu was one of 4 demons belonging to a vampire or incubus class. The other 3 were Lilithu, a she-demon, Adat, Lilu, Lilith's handmaid. Okay, so it goes into stuff here it gets into things that I'm not familiar with. What I want to say is that the story of Lilith obviously starts in Sumerian works and then comes through. We're going to find those same kind of things as evil things that are to contend with in Babylonian works. The Lilith, it's not Lilith. That morphs. As we move along, there's one here that's the Talmudic Lilith. So this comes about later. Let's see, the Talmud 1040 to 1105. So this is well over 1,000 years later. This is morphing along. Time is changing. Life is changing. Civilization's changing. Religion's changing. Somewhat more is known about the life history of Lilith and her nefarious activities as they were imagined in the Talmudic period. Lilith, we learn, was Adam's first wife. However, Adam and Lilith could find no happiness together, not even understanding. When Adam wished to lie with her, Lilith demurred. "Why should I lie beneath you," she asked, "when I am your equal, since both of us were created from dust?" Then Lilith saw that Adam was determined to overpower her. She uttered her magic name of God and rose into the air and flew away to the Red Sea, a place of ill repute full of lascivious demons. Okay, that was originally in Genesis. Or it might not have been called Genesis, but it was an original creation story pre what we know of Genesis today. You want to make a religion, that's not going to work. We still need to contain all the parts in there. This was functional. What this was doing, if you're following my work, this is a mental trip. This is establishing right up front that it's a mental hierarchy. The female, the inner self, is created, but is not equal to the conscious. The conscious is really in charge. Whatever the female becomes is something that is a part of my decisions. My life experience is what I decide, what I want, what I'm thinking. Here, well, I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to read a little bit farther on here. However, in spite of her determined refusal to return to Adam, Lilith soon became attracted to him again and managed to sleep with him against his will. In the meantime, Adam had received Eve as his wife, was also persuaded by her to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and was expelled from the Garden of Eden with the curse of death hanging over his head. When Adam became aware that because of his sin God decreed mortality upon him and all his future descendants, he embarked upon a period of penitence which lasted for 130 years. He fasted, refrained from intercourse with Eve, and in order to mortify his flesh wore a belt of rough fig twigs around his naked body. He could not, however, control his involuntary nocturnal emissions, which were brought about by female spirits who came and coupled with him and bore him spirits, demons, and Lilith. At the same time, male spirits came and impregnated Eve, who thus became the mother of innumerable demon children. The spirits thus procreated are the plagues of mankind. Okay, this sounds so different than what we know, doesn't it? This is really old, and that was old tradition. You don't see that in the religion, but at one point in time, yeah, this was it. What changes? What makes it what makes it change? Okay, so again, the hierarchy was there. Eve is definitely subservient too. Eve is not. It'll when we get into the Bible and interpret it, we see that Eve is subservient to Adam. We know that that whatever is inside of us that acts out and takes charge is actually evil. If we were to take that same concept and go to the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth, right in the beginning it says, at a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath, it was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters. Tiamat right there is going to be the female version of what I would say what Lilith is going to take on that same sort of a role. Tiamat here, everything starts out okay, but they have offspring, gods. The gods become raucous. They become so out of control that they have to be destroyed. Tiamat does not want them destroyed. This represents our inner self. The gods are not really gods. What they are is our qualities early on that become godlike. We're living life not paying attention to what's going on, and we begin acting out. And when things happen, or when we think of something, or when we're getting off course, or maybe you're just sitting there, you want to be happy, but you're mulling over something that's in charge of your head, those are called gods because they're in charge. They're temporary gods. You can control them, but typically they jump in. So these gods are so raucous. The mind is so crazy. We want to destroy it. Tiamat doesn't want it destroyed. That represents the inner self struggling. I can't let this stuff go. Tiamat does get destroyed, but if we start looking, you start seeing elements of, okay, this early female starts out good, turns bad. There's something that doesn't quite work right. Tiamat gets split apart. There's a recreation there. This one isn't quite that way. There's a new Lilith is replaced by Eve as opposed to being reborn herself. But if you look at the stories, you go, well, I can understand where if I was reading this and trying to find the template, I could find the template. But if I'm reading it and trying to find Judaism, I better do something different. We also have Enoch down there, which does a good job showing a lot more Enuma Elish-like characters. Getting rid of that. That's hooked into Genesis as well. Is that in the Bible? No, we dismiss that. But if you look at it, you will realize, well, I think if we studied it, okay, where am I with the Bible now? Okay, so I believe that the Bible has been, at one point in time, that was it, that Lilith got removed, that the Bible, that Genesis was probably like a creation story, not the beginning of the religion, but a creation story, like the Enuma Elish. It would have been like the Jewish creation story as opposed to the Babylonian creation story. And it would have the flood, with the first great flood, the Atrahasis. Yeah. So I think that Genesis would have started out somewhat that way and more in line with sounding a lot like elements of Jewish material. Okay, and I want to make sure I'm clear here before I move on. I don't think I was clear that these represent us. We are Adam. All of our consciousness is Adam, and Lilith is the first, whatever. It's created in a story. We don't have a Lilith to begin with. We have an Eve to begin with, something that is very subservient to us. Okay, in the story that the original one isn't exactly accurate that way. What it's showing us, though, is that mental hierarchy has to be there, and that Lilith represents our early self, inner being, and Eve represents another inner being, and that these two inner beings can be at conflict. I'm doing good, I'm doing bad, I want this, I want that. We know that internal struggle is there. So they're using the two women at opposing, kind of opposing to represent that inner struggle right there. We see that in other places in different ways. But in that case, it did a good job carrying the template. It didn't do a good job carrying a religion to follow. Now, what I'm going to do here is start looking at that closer. Let's go to Genesis. What I'm going to do is let's locate the three places that I say that when we look at them, you're going to say, yeah, that doesn't read like a monotheism. That reads like a polytheism. Let's look at those and see what they're doing and what they mean. They're actually something that emerged from a recent video I did about Babylon. Part of these are in the Babel story. When they're creating the Tower of Babel here and they're mixing the bricks and making them, when we get to the Bible and we'll see. Okay, let's just go find those parts and what shows up in the Bible that looks like it comes from Babylonia, not from a monotheistic religion that we think we know today. All right, I know there's one in Genesis here that starts off with "let us." It's going to be in one of the creation stories here. Let us, there we go. It is in the first creation story, which is odd, where it says in verse 26, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So, there we have it. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. Let me copy that and put it on a different page. What's weird is that "let us" shows up exactly 20 times. I don't know what to do sometimes except shake my head. It's flabbergasting. All right, here's the second one in chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. Actually, it's the third one. The second one is when the destruction has to happen. But this one matches because of the sound of it. Here, or at least it seems like it more to me so. Everything is being built. They've said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." We're going to get back to this story here. This is the Tower of Babel here, but this is Babel that's being built in the Enuma Elish right here. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. And the Lord said, look, there are only one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Let us go down. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So there's the other one. Come, let us go down and confuse their language. Yeah, there we go. I just got to get on the right screen. Okay. Whoops. All right. What was that? That was 11:7. All right. Now, that was it, the us. All right. So we got us, our, and us. All right. Now, the other one is in chapter 6. And here we are, the wickedness of humankind. When the people began to multiply in the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took wives for themselves of all that they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh. Their days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans, who bore children to them. All right? So we just had the sons of God come down and impregnate human daughters who had children, who were the heroes of old, the warriors of renown. People may know those as the Nephilim. All right, well, so there we have it. The other one we got twice up here. I'm just going to, let me just grab this one right here. We don't need them both. The sons of God, really it is, that's it. The sons of God was said twice, wasn't it? That's the one we're looking for. And I'm just going to say 6. There's a couple of locations there. Anyway, okay, so there we have the sons of God. So you can see that they both indicate something that does not sound like a monotheism, but rather sounds like a polytheism. Now, the sons of God one, a lot of people try to explain that one away of saying, well, those were angels. You know what? It doesn't say that. The term angels appears in, there we go, angels. King James Version, there we go, angels. Angel said 15 times, which is a good number. That's been gathered up in analog farms. So we don't want that to be angel. Angel is, we don't want it to be 16 times of angel. It's a son of God. There's something different going on. Yeah, I don't know if you'll understand those counts. It doesn't matter. The sons of God is not angels. Let's make some comparisons, okay? Those bad things there are the bad gods in the Enuma Elish. What are they in the book of Enoch? This is a pattern here. What are we going to come to is chapter 6. Ooh, Bible, chapter 6, time for destruction. Here we have the book of Enoch, chapter 6. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born to them beautiful and fair daughters. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, come, let us choose wives from among the children of men. That just said angels. Well, I need to learn, don't I? And have children with them. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear you will not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of this great sin. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual curses, so that we will not abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then they all swore together, and bound themselves by mutual curses. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared and the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual curses on the act. All right, so Semjaz is the bad guy that's going to have to be wiped out. He's the one that is actually... What's happening here? The beautiful daughters of men, that's our inner qualities being corrupted again. This is another way of holding that right there. Your inner selves are going to be, and it's going to have to be wiped out. Semjaza is the bad guy. If we come into the Enuma Elish and start reading it, what we're going to find is that Tiamat was the mother who gave birth to all, in the same way that Eve was the mother who gave birth to all. But what is going to happen here is this. Here, actually, I'll just bring it up on the screen. I've got the Enuma Elish. Lady Huber is the evil force. All the things are going wrong. Tiamat enlisted a horned snake. All of this is where the bad is happening. But instead of the character Samjaza, what we have here is the character Kingu. Kingu is taking on that role of the bad one. She conferred upon Kingu the chief rank amongst them all, bestowing the generalship of her army and rule of the Congress. So Kingu is going to represent the early part of you that is in charge, that's going to have to be destroyed, your earlier self. Bestowing the generalship of her army and rule of the Congress, to hold aloft the spear, to signify battle, to gather the warriors. She had given him high command of the entire combat force, and placed him to be seated upon the throne of rule, saying, okay, so I don't have to keep reading that. What I'm going to do is watch what happens when Kingu gets caught. All right, I'm jumped right ahead down here. There's a net. They were trapped within a net. This is after the bad guys have been caught. Marduk has taken over. We are now ruling our new world. They were trapped within a net, and there they remained. There they shrank back, overcome as they were by despair. But they endured this affliction of being held incarcerated. And concerning the several demons emitting deadly beams, these being the army of creatures who passed to her right. All right, he crushed them under their foot. Regarding Kingu, there we go, who was the highest ranked among them, he ruined him, adding him to the tally of the other defeated. Okay, so what we have is they're all trapped into a net. Why are they trapped into a net? Why wouldn't he just destroy them? The reason is because they're memories. You cannot get rid of them. They're going to be trapped, but they're not going to be effective anymore. Now, if we go to the book of Enoch, what happens here to Semjaza? He's got to be trapped somehow too. Is there a net? What do we have going on? Here we have it. I've jumped way ahead. This is verse 4 in chapter 10. And again, the Lord said to Raphael, Raphael is the one going in and destroying instead of Marduk. Raphael is the one going in here and destroying the old. Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and split open the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him in, and fill the hole by covering him with rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him live there forever, and cover his face that he may not see the light. You see, live forever, but you can't be effective anymore. So those are the elements of trapped memories. What are the harpies in the Greek myth, the voyage of the Argo, when the harpies are defiling Phineas's food daily? And there's the problem. Yep, got a cyclical problem going on. However, the twins go in to destroy them, chase them off, and Zeus says, you know what, you can't destroy them, but they won't bother you anymore. So that element is still there. This is the bothersome element that is getting somehow rendered ineffective. That's the bad stuff happening that's been healed, because it's still there, but it's no longer effective. All right, let's get back to the Babel story now. What I want to do is we're just going to grab a bunch of stuff and bring it all together. There's so much, it's like you can't just connect two dots. We have to grab about 6 dots, and that's the only way they connect. Okay, so if that makes any sense to you, let me find my right page here. What I need to do is, there it is, NSRV. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. And the Lord said, Look, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. Okay, we got that one. These are weird ones because you look at it and go, everybody's working together. They're building a tower up to God. They love God. They're trying to get there. God's like, no, you can't do that. You're all working together. We can't have that. Pretty soon there's nothing you can't do. So instead, I'm going to just scatter your lives and wipe you out and wipe out your building and make it so you guys can't even get along with each other. Okay, so I read that and go, really? How bizarre. Yeah, that's exactly what you get out of that if you look at it, if you don't interpret it. All right? Well, let's interpret it. The building is what I'm building. That's me. Emptiness in the beginning, working together, we get scattered in the end. That's how that happens. The Tower of Babel is the tower of the human, the tower of each of us. And, by that, what I mean is the culmination of our life experiences, our memories and emotions that make us what we are. That is our tower. We could be different people from different experiences. We both have our tower, but they're different towers. It's really your belief structure. It's a metaphorical reference. It's not a real tower. It is what I built. I wanted to go to a lofty place. It didn't work. How do we get there? God stopped me. Good or bad, whatever your tower is. These are metaphorical. Okay, let's go to the Enuma Elish and see if this measures up. I get these mixed up sometimes. All right, what we have is all the way down in tablet 6. They're rebuilding near the end. It's the 7 tablets of creation. We've obviously destroyed Tiamat, taken over control from King U, put things back in order, and now we're building our new city, our new selves. Then build Babylon to be the construction project you seek. Have there be mud bricks cast, and construct a lofty temple. Thus permit us to build a temple where we might find shelter, so that whenever we gather to you, we might lounge there. Once Marduk heard their words, his face shone like sunlight. So here, you got people saying, hey, we want to build a tower. Marduk, the hero's like, oh yeah, let's do this. Everybody wants to get together in a high place. You see, it's different. Then build Babylon to be the construction project you seek. Have there be mud bricks cast and construct a lofty temple. Thus, the Anunnaki excavated, making bricks for a full year. And when the following year came, they had erected it high, rising aloft the peaks of Azagila, lofty temple, which was nearby the Apsu. That's the watery origins of all. They had constructed a lofty ziggurat fit for the Apsu, new origins. They were also built places of residence for Anu, Elil, and Ea, highest among any edifice that was established before them. These are all good gods. They're not, this is not a real-life story. This is qualities that we have. Our sense of life, our sense of justice, of fairness, of compassion. We have different qualities, and we want to build them in a high place and keep them housed there. Highest among any edifice that was established before them. We want those to reign above all things else in our minds. We want them at the top of our life experience, where its towers gaze down upon the foundation of Eshara. After they had completed their work on the temple Asagila, and each of the Anunnaki made his own personal temple, then the 300 Agigi gods, or Agigi, I've heard it both ways, who inhabited heaven, together with the Anunnaki gods of the Apsu, came together. Then the Lord invited his forebears, the gods, to a feast. There in the vast palace he had made as his own residence. Truly this gate of God, gate inward, will now likewise be your home. So let there be singing and festivity and be content. Think of this in your mind, not a place out in history. Your mind. So let there be singing and festivity and content. Thus the high gods took their place there at the tables. Beer mugs were set out, and they took part in the banquets. Then after having enjoyed themselves there for some time, they were all sent to Grand High Temple to make a show offering. Okay, I'll stop reading it there. But that is where the Tower of Babel comes from. But you see, it's constructed as a good thing. And in the story, what it is, it's about a people where you destroyed the Tiamat, all that. Well, that's kind of weird, but you build a new temple. If you go through there, you will see that they're assigning roles of like doing agriculture, waterways, things like that. So you can see that the teaching is meant to lead a people. We're doing this. We're actually living this. At the same time, if you turn it inward, you go, oh, this whole story is built on me, and Babylon is my temple. And the high things that are up here, the high gods, they're not really gods out there. These are represented by something in my mind. So there's multiple gods. What happens when Judaism comes around? It doesn't quite sound the same, but the gods are still, let us go down. They're taking those same gods that the Babylonians were using to say, come on up here and let's get together, and saying, nope, they're bad gods. They're going to come down and wipe you out. So they've changed the role of those gods right there. But if you think it through, then that seems like those two parts of the Bible would be very old that would connect back with the Babylonian material. All right, it seems to me like this is the evolution of religions, that's how they work. You can look in more recent times and see that there's been a number of those that are, that we can see that the Christian religion, of course, morphed from Judaism as the next group came along and said, you know what, you guys didn't keep your covenant with God, so he abandoned you, and we're his people now. And the Jews are like, no, that didn't happen. Well, we know what's going on there. We share guns, missiles, and enemies, so we're good to go, right? Then along comes, 500 years later, that Muslims are like, you know what, we're not Jews, we're not Christians. And what is that Father, Son, Holy Ghost thing? This started out as a monotheism. Now we got three things out there. Nope. So, we see that continually happens, but they springboard off of each other. Judaism came from Babylonians. And I mean that in the same way that Christianity came from Judaism. It grows off of that as a source. I sometimes fail to say that Mormonism is the same thing. It's sprungboard off of that, except there's one big exception. Everybody in Abrahamic material in the background knows about that template, and they've built everything on it, and they follow a pattern. Joseph Smith, clueless. All he did was create a religion. The template's not there. You get the Book of Mormon, you will never find that inner path. It's not there. Okay, the next part is the numbering patterns. I've done this a little bit before. If you follow my work, you'll see that there is something that's actually demonstrable and significant in the numberings in Genesis, where there is a pattern that we can look at, and it appears as though they're gathering up a pool of numbers, that if we look at them, we see that this pool of numbers are repeated 4,000 times in the Bible. It's not just 3, 7, 40, and 12. There's a handful of numbers that are all being repeated. Some of them really stand out because of where they are, but the 5s, the 10s, the 20s, things like that, they don't show up as much because they kind of disappear into the background. But when you're, 3 days in a whale, 3 days waiting for someone to come and rise you from the dead, 3 days while you yourself are rising from the dead, there's certain patterns of things in there you go, why are those all 3 days? Why are all these 7 days? Why are all those 40 years or 40 days? There's things that you question. In researching that, it is there. There is something incredibly, significantly there. We don't know it, we don't see it, we don't look at it right, but we don't have it loaded in our brains correctly. It would have to be completely memorized, and you would have to know exactly how many times nouns and verbs were repeated within the story. Something that if you think about it, it would have been nothing for us if that's all we did for our lives. And back then, in their simpler times, I'm sure they had complex lives and hard work, but they didn't have media, all that other stuff coming in. Everything that they were doing is very local and very close, and stuff like this was very important. These are very thick and very deep. We're not looking at them. All right, what I've got up here now is the Enuma Elish name count. From the Enuma Elish, I've gone through and just grabbed names and searched the document and asked how many times is it repeating. What it appears to me is that is how they are encoding the story. There's a couple of layers of things going on, but the word repeats are very specific. They're meaningful. If I were to come down here to 3, for example, I see 3, sky, shelter, asagila, peak, feast, brick, breast, 7, divine counsel, divine force, swell. All of those words or phrases were repeated exactly 3 times. You can find these as you're reading through because they'll be stacked together in repeats, and you go, what do those look like? These are numbers that are actually going to be the same numbers that are going to be appearing from the Jewish material. Look at the 3. 3, what about the 7? We got a net, sleep, mantles of brilliance, feet, source, all repeated exactly 7 times. Here we have 8, would be day 8, like in Genesis, first sin. This is where it goes bad. Lady Huber is the bad element in the story. You go through, Lady Huber is the one who brings the repeated pain. Nudamud, I'm not sure. More research needs to be done. Poison, blood, devil, Elil, birth, wisdom. I don't know why wisdom would be bad. I will say, and I should have said, there could be a few anomalous count issues with this because the clay tablets, they were fairly complete, but they were slightly fragmentary in nature. So there can be some, I think most of these are going to be pretty on from where they are. Anyway, let's keep going through there. The Ijiji and Anunnaki both repeated exactly 10 times. Water, above, exactly 12 times. That would be Jewish. Night, 13. That's bad. We would find that bad in Jewish material. We have night here. I don't know what that means. Likewise, analogous. This is a weird one. Kingu's a bad thing. Fate is naming, memory, and emotions. Fate is, remember in the very beginning, here it is right in the beginning of Tablet 1, right in the beginning here, there were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. So, fates was said 17 times. Fates, interestingly enough, if I go to Genesis, that one is collected as a good thing. Honestly, just think about it. No names were spoken and no fates pronounced. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Naming means I've had an experience. I've had an experience that I have judged, and now as a result, I'm going to have an experience, continuing experience. So naming and a fate is cause and effect. A seed is planted and there's a result. So there was no names to be spoken, no fates pronounced. This is before we have a brain, before we're having life experiences. We're just born. Okay. Let's get back into the list here. And of course I meant cognitive thinking brain. Of course we have a brain. I didn't mean to say it that way. I mean the brain connectivity enough to be self-aware and to have life experiences and to be able to judge the life experiences. No names were spoken, no fates pronounced. This is our life before that time. We're in that zone. Yeah, we got a brain. Okay, so the fate could be either way. Kingu, we know Kingu is a bad thing. However, Kingu said 17 times here. We get to Genesis. Sarai's name it said 17 times. Sarai's a good thing. And they don't serve the same role. Yeah, Sarai's, well, no, Kingu's the, charge. Nope, it's a little bit different. So the numbering pattern is still there. 18 would be the step up from that power battle. Yeah, I don't know. 24, heaven, earth, Apsu. 33 words. 33 would be good in Jewish, but who knows? Now, here's an interesting one. Marduk is repeated exactly 41 times here, and in the book of Genesis, Noah's name is repeated exactly 41 times. So there's a point where you look and go, okay, there's something patterned there that we're not supposed to know about. Well, no, we are. It's there for us if we find it. It's right there. It's not hidden. We're carrying it. We just don't know how to look at it. Okay, what do I need to do? Let me go back to Genesis and just show a couple of things very quickly. All right, more fun facts to know and tell. The term naked, the word naked, appears in Genesis exactly 4 times, which would comply with the Babylonian numbering system. It's the only place that it appears in all of Genesis, right here 4 times. And this is, that's the older material. This is the first sin. If we go to the Babel language appears 4 times in the book of Genesis, and all right here only in chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. That fits with the Babylonian numbering pattern sequence. However, I think it inverts whether it's good or bad. There's still more to look at. Anyway, you see that there, the language only 4 times. What else do we have? Confound. Two times. That fits with the Babylonians. And it's right here, the only 2 times, again, right here in the Babel story. Then nowhere else in Genesis. What else do we have here? Brick. Twice, and only right here. So those are the kind of things that I look at and go, yeah, you know what? It looks to me like something is just patterned in. There's things that used to fit and sound a certain way, blended with other things that we don't know. They sound a little different. The patterns are hard to spot. And then also bear in mind that different authors have different styles. They've got different words. They've got different choices of verbiage. If there's like two places here and here where it's following some kind of a verbal pattern that isn't followed elsewhere, what does that sound like? It sounds like there's different authors, different times, different pieces, different sorts of material that have been blended together. But boy, there's one more part that you don't use the computer on, and that is reading them conceptually. That has to happen in the mind. That's a part of it that I think a lot of people struggle with that right there. If you can't get past that, the numbers don't even matter. Most of what I can see at this point is only because of the computer. It's like, ooh, this is tough. At some point, you kind of see what they're doing. But it's, I used to wonder, I wonder what words they're doubling up or tripling or, saying an exact amount of times, all the way up to 41 or more. 80 times exactly, one of the numbers collected in stories. It's like mind-boggling, the size and how much they're doing it. We want this name to be good. We're going to repeat it exactly 80 times or 90 times, the exact amount of times that is in that analog pool. So it's not just the numbers showing up, it's how many times names are repeated that people aren't even looking at. That makes it just so much thicker. However, there's a blend that it's difficult to sort. I thought I had Genesis once for a time, but there was something not right with it. And now I'm seeing what's happening, that the Babylonian material is feeding the Genesis material. Then the Genesis material, which was using some form of the material, expanded but took on new numbers. So there's a blend and an overlap of stories and of numbering sequence that's it's kind of hard to put it all together. Yeah. But I keep seeing this and going, God, boy, this is important. Look at this. Yeah. This is a big hook in right here. I need to focus on the analogs. That's going to help. There's an analog farm somewhere upstream in Babylonian Sumerian material. I have no idea. It gets too far away from my home, my source of my own knowledge. People that have been experts in that area that have kind of the same sort of thinking that we've got going on, that have that. Yeah, there needs to be other people working on this. It's out there. I'm sure we'd read something and go, bingo, that's it. It's going to be some weird numbering thing. So-and-so lived this far and the king lived this many years and blah, blah, blah. All kinds of stuff there'll be something in there that will be recognizable as an analog farm. Anyway, till then, I'll just focus on Genesis. I know that the analogs that are developed there are good for Genesis and downstream. I think that there is obviously that Terra, I believe it is, if I'm not mistaken, or Shem. There's an analog farm that I have to go look at a little bit closer that had it had the 600s and things like that, and things that were repeated 6 times or 9 times or something that didn't match up with other material. Now I'm starting to see, okay, they're kind of pointing and linking through there. It's a lot thicker than, well, all right. Well, I better focus on that. Doing this is fun, though. It is pointing out something that's like, wow, you know what? Look at this. You can see this. The comparisons just keep going on. If you were to go through there, Apsu, who gave birth to it all with Tiamat. Tiamat was the mother who gave birth to it all. Eve was the mother who gave birth to all. But when things go bad, you see that the Apsu gets put away, gets pinned away, is out of the picture until there is a return, till Marduk comes back and takes over. Then Apsu is released again. So the creator God, the original source, was like out of the picture. If you go read the Bible, it doesn't say exactly that, but you will see that right after the Cain and Abel story, that God just disappears, sends Cain goes, and God disappears and does not return again until it's time for the flood. Same thing. All of those elements, you could keep looking at them and going, yeah, they don't sound the same if you read them, but if you step back and look at the concept, what is that? God created things, disappeared, came back when it's during the destruction. Look at the concepts. What's the same about them, not what's different. Anyway, so that's what makes it thick and complicated. And then in final, applying it to yourself, that higher awareness is what that is. We're created from a higher source. we live from that when we're young. Then we go off and live life's experiences and we lose touch with that higher awareness. When it's time to come back and start healing, we go back and re-engage with that higher awareness. So there's something in here that is more than just a story floating out there. It's an interactive pathway on a template that must be navigated using multiple layers of interpretation and playing it out like they did. Sit down for what? Oh, I don't know, 20, 30 years? Yeah. And play it out in your mind. I guarantee you'll come up with some stuff. All right. I hope the video was fun and interesting. Again, I could just keep going on with this. It's like, oh my gosh, it keeps going and going and going. Whew. Questions, comments? I'll see you in the next video.